This is Arnold Michaelis. The program is Insight, an insight into the minds and hearts of the outstanding personalities of our times. Through the medium of relaxed and informal conversation in the privacy of one's home, we have an opportunity to go below the surface of mere personality, the flipness of superficial thought, and come to grips with what people really are, rather than what we think them to be because of their professional exteriors. During these weeks in Hollywood, it's been an exciting adventure for me, as well as a great privilege, to talk with some of the finest, most substantial, and public-spirited human beings I've ever met. Such a person is Ronald Reagan, for years one of the best-known actors in the business. Ronnie distinguished himself in serving as president of the Screen Actors Guild from 1947 through 1952, and for the past number of years he's further distinguished himself in serving the General Electric Theater as host, program supervisor, and actor in some of the plays. Ronnie invited me to his home in Pacific Palisades, where he gave me the grand tour of one of the most unusual houses in the country. Then we settled comfortably in his study, and our conversation began as we reminisced about his life as a radio sports announcer just about 22 years ago. Did I detect a somewhat nostalgic cast in your voice invoking the word radio?
Well, yes, and I sort of regret now what seems to have happened to radio, and maybe they gave up a little too soon on some of the things they were doing. Today, radio just seems to settle down to a half a dozen disc jockeys on each station and canned music.
Well, tonight you're the exception. Well, this house, of course, which we've all seen on so many occasions, on those delightful commercials which you and Nancy do for General Electric, I think it's the most interesting house I've ever been in. And everything in it seems to have been supplied by General Electric, with the possible exception of your 7-week-old namesake.
Well,
how did they manage to stay out of that?
I don't know. It's, I guess it was just the summer replacement season.
Well, they're different currents anyway.
Yes.
I think the niche that you have with General Electric is really unique in our field of entertainment.
Yes, this situation is unique in television. I don't know of any of my colleagues that are engaged in exactly the same type of setup that we have. But you see, the General Electric show is not wholly a selling show. In other words, it isn't a show with a product that now sells. It's the public relations show, a program of institutional advertising.
Yeah.
And so in connection with that, the program furthers the General Electric public relations policies, which are incorporated in an expression of called employee and community relations. And Mr. Cordner, the president of General Electric and now the chairman of the board, is one of the first industrialists in this country to really put into practice a program of decentralization. And the General Electric Company is really decentralized, not only just in name. They have over 165 plants in 38 states. And when he decentralized not only geographically that way, he gave each one of these plants virtual autonomy. And the result was they had a problem of trying to keep all these scattered people sort of feeling that they weren't orphans, that they still belonged to the company. And at the same time, they want in these many communities their people to have their first loyalty to the community. They don't want to go into a town and then have the employees feel, well, we're just in here on a lease. We don't really belong to this town. They're very proud of the fact that their people are on the school boards and participate in the community affairs.
Well, then the management and labor relationships of a company like General Electric have really become a great deal more complex, probably, than any other major corporation in the country.
Yes, and I think they have laid down a challenge to organized labor. Now, you mentioned that I was an officer of the Screen Actors Guild, which is an AFL union, and I am still an officer of that. So I am now speaking from the standpoint of labor, and I'm looking at General Electric and what I've learned, because a part of my job now is twice a year going around the country to the plant cities, meeting the employees, participating in whatever community functions are going on in that community that General Electric wants to be a part of and tries to be a part of, such as sometimes participating in charity drives or being a speaker at the annual Chamber of Commerce meeting or something. And I have to say, from the standpoint of labor, the General Electric has issued quite a challenge, and organized labor better look around and review their own attitudes in the face of this very enlightened policy toward the people who work for them. And it's as simple as this, that the man who works for you in a company is also the customer. You can't wear two hats. You can't browbeat him at one stage of the day and then when he's out shopping, adopt a policy of the customer is always right.
Well, now, you say that their policies are far-sighted and benevolent policies from the corporate standpoint.
That's right.
Well, now, as president of the Screen Actors Guild, you had to negotiate contracts with various picture studios out here, didn't you?
Yes.
Well, now, supposing that you were trying to negotiate a labor contract with General Electric, don't you think that you'd be impressed by the type of program they've set up?
Yes, I would.
Well, and don't you think that labor is bound to adjust to the kind of beneficence you suggest that General Electric reflects now in its management labor policies?
Yes, very definitely. But what I think I was trying to say was that I think right at the moment, not overall, but in some areas, particularly among some of the, let's say, older, more old-fashioned labor leaders, there is a reluctance to accept this new attitude on the part of management. There are still those in labor who want to keep it a contest, a battle, a class war.
Don't you think this is labor's growing pains, actually?
Yes. Yes, I think this is the first time they have ever, these recent years, felt and had the strength they now have. And I think they're still coming out of now, again, remember, I'm speaking of isolated individuals.
Oh, of course.
There's still a tendency to say, well, now is our chance, let's get even.
Yeah.
And they've got to outgrow this. They've got to realize that there's no room for this anymore.
Well, don't you think, too, that this is a byproduct of the thing that we call human nature? Our whole system appears to be founded on a basis of competition. Sometimes competition, when it's naked, can get rather ugly.
Yes.
Because then you overlook the point of view of your competitor because of your dogged determination to win your point. Don't you think now we're ushering in the age of massive reconciliation?
That's a pretty good phrase, yes. And
I stole it, by the way. I don't want to take credit for it. Some newly elected president of a Protestant ministers' conference invoked that phrase, and it made a great impression on me a few weeks ago. He said that he thought this was the age where we really should invoke a progressive and aggressive policy of massive reconciliation.
Well, I think he's very right. And the funny thing about labor is that labor could turn to the past and get a pretty good lesson in this, because the great man of labor, Samuel Gompers, if you go back and review, you'll find that Gompers, even at the most bitter moments when he was being really assailed by narrow-minded reactionaries and side of management, never lost sight of the fact and never ceased saying that labor and management must be partners in this free enterprise system. He was always against a strike. He always said that there had been poor leadership if you had to strike.